raise of hands. When Mike asked for me to do this presentation, who hasn't started a podcast at this point in their life? All right, well, that answers that question. Thank you so much. This is going to be fun. Quick workshop overview. The fact of the matter is I have been doing this forever. My first book on podcasting came out 2 years before the iPhone. So the challenge for today is to take the last 15 years of my life and narrow it down to 90 minutes. So this is going to be fast, this is going to be loud, this is going to be crazy. You're going to want to take notes, and I will give you access to the slides when all of this is done. Our focus for today is the business implementation of podcasting and expanding reach for podcasting. If you're in the room because you just want to get on a microphone and just let mom hear it or something like that, that's not what today's presentation is about. And we're looking at a lot more than just the dial talk dones of the world. We're talking more than just talking into a thing, making a podcast come out the other side. We're going to go wide, we're going to go deep, and we are going to go fast. And I'm going to intersperse it with stories from the podcast partnership. My clients have done some really cool things, and some of them have even given me permission to share them with you. And so you will get the ability to do some real world stuff. I've got one client, less than 400 downloads per episode, who's $1 million podcast. Anybody want to hear about that? Yeah, exactly. I like talking about it. It sounds kind of cool. And we're going to be talking about two things, podcasting technique and podcasting tech. And there is a difference between the two. It's really important because tech is always going to change. If I make any recommendation from stage about a certain amount of tech, tomorrow there will be a release that somebody made it better and did that kind of thing. So we'll talk about the tech, and we're going to give you a unique solution to taking on the tech, but we're also going to chat about the technique. The fact of the matter is you can always outsource the tech. There are some great companies downstairs in the networking lounge that can help you out with some of these things. And so definitely take advantage of that. The best results come from the best technique. If you know what it is that you're looking for, and you know how to get to it, that's the position that you want to find yourself in. So it's really a simple process today. Podcasting is 4 steps. Step number 1 is you make digital media. Starts there. And should be obvious, but it's, that's what we got to do. Now, sometimes, you hear about what Oprah did? Oprah went back her last 25 years of her show and is releasing it as a podcast. Yeah. Now, some of that stuff wasn't even digital media. Some of that stuff is tapes in a basement somewhere, surrounded by guard dogs or something. But the fact of the matter is, they had to take those tapes, they had to make it digital media. Step 1 is making digital media. Number 2 is we're going to put that digital media online, obviously. I'm going to tell you how to do that intelligently, strategically, because podcasting is more than just if I just put an MP3 on my website, isn't that enough? A little bit more than that. And then number 3, once we put it online, we're going to make it podcast ready. And because you want to be podcast ready, and when the day comes, when you get famous, when all the downloads happen, the last thing you want is your server to crash. Then finally, last but not least, we're going to tell the world. So we are making today's presentation timeless on purpose. You notice we've got some cameras running around. We're going to be using this. The goal for this is to give you how to podcast today, but also video that's going to be good for the next 3 years. If you go to podcastpartnership.com/recommends, this will be also the last slide in my presentation, and we'll keep it up so you don't have to desperately write this down right now. If you go to podcastpartnership.com/recommends, it is a ongoing, continuously updated Google Doc of all the tools, all the techniques, everything we're talking about. My favorite mic today is the Samson CO1U. We'll chat about that, but that mic might change tomorrow. And the great thing is, if you go to paulcolligan.com/recommends, you'll be able to link to that new mic. The goal is I'm not going to make you give me an email address for this. This is something that we're just giving out to the community and something that we're proud to be part of. And again, that will be the last slide. So everything I chat about today, know that the references for it online will be there. So finally, you need a team. When you launch a podcast, when you put a podcast out there in the world, it's not just you. Now, some of you are shaking your heads going, yeah, you don't know the way my business works. It is just me. But sometimes in business, you have to, yep, I can see it. Sometimes you've got to wear 6 different hats. And we'll be chatting a little bit about the Team Clarity Matrix, which is the thing you have in front of you. The Team Clarity Matrix, 2-sided worksheet. Team Clarity Matrix is the right side, page 1, if you will. There are 6 people in your podcast team. And you should be able to write down in those little name badges on your worksheet who those 6 people are. First one is strategy and review. What's the difference between strategy and review? I had someone with 7 million downloads. Raise your hand if 7 million downloads is a goal. 7 million downloads could clearly tell me this elegantly written, elegantly designed, beautiful, beautiful strategy. Then I asked him, well, how's that going for you? And he said, and I quote, I don't know. Strategy and review. What are you trying to do, and is it working? That takes a very special person. You got to figure out that. Number 2 is the talent. Now, a lot of you in the room are going to be the talent. A lot of you in the room are working with the talent, but somebody's actually got to record the thing. Makes sense. You know, sometimes the talent is old tapes in the vault, like Oprah, but you got to have the talent. Number 3, you have to have the edit. Somebody's got to edit the thing. Makes sense. Number 4, you got to publish it. We'll chat with you how to do that. Number 5, you got to promote it. Because a podcast without promotion is like a billboard in your basement. Yep, that's a tweetable. You can share that one. And then finally, number 6 is somebody's got to manage the whole thing. Because the problem is when you're dealing with the talent who promises to record something and getting it to you on time, you need someone to yell at them and tell them to get these things out on time. So those are that. If you go to teambeforetech.com, that is a website that has about 30 minutes of video training on the Team Clarity Matrix, and you can get a PDF of that as well. Actually, at that recommends website, we have the slide as well. Okay, that's a blank slide. That means we're going into a transition. Ready? Transition, go. Okay, number 1, make digital media. 2, theme. 3, a great podcast starts with great content worth podcasting. This is really important. A great podcast starts with great content worth podcasting. Some of the podcast nerds will tell you, well, if you don't have the finest audio known to man, you should not be, you've met them, maybe hired them. You should not be doing this. And I'm going to tell you a story about a podcast that none of you have heard about because his audio quality was terrible. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. He had this episode called I Have a Dream, okay? And in this episode of I Have a Dream, the audio was terrible. You could hear the background crowd. The microphone was like 60 years old. It was recorded mono, on an analog tape. This Martin Luther guy, if he'd actually, had good audio, it would have been a better show. Okay, you get what I'm saying? Quick overview. Podcasting is your content on your terms as accessible as possible. It's your content on your terms as consumable as possible. I have clients who record their podcast on the way to work on their iPhone with a suction cup thing on the window, and they're running multi-million-dollar companies with millions of downloads because that's all the time he has to record. Sometimes you need a studio, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you take from the archives, sometimes you create something new, sometimes you do a lot of things. It's your content on your terms as consumable as possible. Warning, this section is going to have the most amount of slides. That link at the end will give you access to all these slides. Are we ready? Yes. Are we ready? Yes. There we go. Okay, so 4 things in the process. Number 1, we want to create lossless media. Now, that's a nerd term. Not many of you in the room are nerds. I can tell nerds don't go to San Diego. Usually we're scared of the sun. What lossless is lossless is audio. If you make a copy of lossless audio, it sounds exactly the same. Nothing is lost in the process of recording the audio. The way we can fit so much stuff in an MP3 is a lot of stuff gets lost when you make a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You ever heard a podcast and it sounds like it's not a human, but it's a Cylon from Battlestar Galactica? That's because they didn't record in lossless. Create your content in lossless. 99% of the time, that's a WAV file. Sometimes it isn't. Talk to your nerd. You edit in lossless. You don't edit in MP3. You get the big file. You get the best possible quality that you can. You edit it in that format. Then you keep a lossless project of everything. It's a big file, but you know what? Hosting's cheap these days. Then, as the very last step, you make the MP3. Well, Paul, I got to create a podcast every week. Yes, still do this process. Had another customer, massive show, millions of downloads. Forgot to get copyright clearance on the theme song for the show. Oops. And the thought of editing these dead MP3 files to take out the media file was overwhelming, didn't do it, show got killed, but if you had the projects, we could have fixed all this. So the process of creating is you create it, lost this, you edit it, lost this, you keep lost this projects, you keep those online forever, keep a backup, and then you finalize it, MP3 at the end. So picking, number one, picking your topic. Raise your hand if picking the topic is a big issue. Good, a lot of you know what your topic is. That's fantastic. The 4 M's of podcast monetization is the other side of the worksheet that you have in front of you. Okay, the 4 M's of podcast monetization is really simple. The first M is your market. Who's my market? Okay? Stay-at-home moms. Okay? COOs, not CEOs, COOs. Social media directors, people in the mortuary business, okay? Who is your market? You gotta identify who your market is. If you think your market is everybody, your market is nobody, and your podcast will fail a miserable death, okay? So you gotta figure out who your market is first. And the better you can define them, and by the way, if you can give them a name or her a name, and you can know exactly what they want, that's the whole avatar thing. Who's your market? Then number 2, what's your message? This is really important because you take the market, the stay-at-home mom, there's a lot of messages for the stay-at-home mom. Number 1 is just God bless you. Number 2 is it's okay that you're tired. Number 3 is here's how to make some money in the process. Number 4, here's how to educate. There's all sorts of things that you can say. So what's your market? What's your very specific message to that market? I'm starting to see some light bulbs go off. And then, and this is really the important question, where's the money in that? Because if there is no money in that, you might want to find a new market or maybe a new message. And then last but not least, it becomes the media. What media do we do this to? If your market is people who are scared of iPhones, maybe podcasting isn't the best media. Maybe the good old dead tree edition is where you want to go. But if you take those 4 M's of podcast monetization, you figure out those 4 things, now you have a strategy. And we'll talk a little bit later, then you can kind of track the strategy, see how it's working, go from there. So far, so good? And even if it wasn't, what are you going to say, right? Episodic big picture. Here's the truth with podcasting today. If you go home with anything, go home with this today. They come for the topic, they stay for the voice. They come for the topic, they stay for the voice. I am interested in how to X. That's what attracts me to the show. But then I really like the person who's talking about X. Then the person who's talking about X says, by the way, I have a show. Every Tuesday we talk about this. Ooh. You hit the subscribe button, you start listening every week, week after week. That's where it goes. So the episodic big picture, come for the topic, stay for the voice. So if you are the person who is talking to mortuary owners about mortuary marketing, yes, that's a real podcast and he's doing really, really well. What's that voice that's going to get the mortuary owners to come back? That's how we put all this stuff together. We'll go back to that. Reality check. Raise your hand if you're into the exciting world of podcast interview marketing. Go ahead, raise your hand. Wow, so few. This is cool. Oh, good, maybe we're learning. There's this concept that you don't have to do really work. You just interview people and let them do the work, okay? It's a big business. A lot of people are making money on this. I was asked by several people online to go over this. We'll go over this pretty quickly since the audience isn't there. Number 1, you know your topic like nobody else does. I've had random people who say, I should be on your show. Well, what's your topic? And by the way, do you know what my topic is? Funny thing is we have clients, kind of running an agency and all, and we get all of their email from their feed. And it's really funny because somebody who's hired someone to help them do some podcast interview marketing has emailed every single one of my clients saying this person would be perfect for your audience. And our clients are across a whole bunch of audiences. So first thing is, you know your topic better than anybody else. And the person who's coming in to do the interview might not really know the topic, might not really serve your audience, because number 2 is serve your audience before you serve anyone else. If you listen to a show and it has nothing to do with the topic, how many more episodes are you going to listen to? So this idea of getting an interview fascinating, had a person come up to me, I kid you not, hey, Paul, got a question for you. Yes, has anybody ever been on your podcast naked? Huh? It's an audio podcast. It's not even worthwhile. Well, Paul, I'm the naked executive or something. I teach you how to be authentic and that kind of stuff. What does it have to do with podcasting? Well, I guess podcasters should be authentic. I guess. Don't ever pitch something with the words, I guess. Okay? Serve your audience before you serve anyone else. Number 3, it can be a lazy excuse. Enough said. Number 4, it can be a pyramid scheme. There are podcasts out there whose entire purpose in life is to get you on the podcast so they can charge you. And they don't have listeners. They're certainly not going to bring you business. And it's a pyramid scheme, and I'd like to see it destroyed. Number 5, you're not Oprah. And you know how I know? Because Oprah's Oprah. There's only one. And see, there's this idea that like, I'm going to be the interviewer. It's a skill. Some of you have it, some of you don't. But here's the thing. Have you ever had a podcast change your life solely because the person was a good interviewer? You had a podcast change your life because the topic was important. You had a podcast change your life because, yeah, this is good. And the person who's doing this does this every week. And I want to come back. Had a client call, Paul, how do I be more like Oprah? Dude, you can't, there's no way. However, very niche, see, he knew who his market was. And he knew what the message was. He knew where the money was. And because his niche was so tight, this guy had access to that part of the market that nobody else had. He said, these people would pay money just to be in the room as you two talked shop. And it's a lot easier to talk shop than it is to have a fancy interview where somebody cries 15 minutes into it. Okay? You're not Oprah, you're never gonna be, but you have content for your audience. You have stuff that can change them, and it's pretty fantastic. This is a hack, if you will. When you interview, catch their eye. A lot of people interview over the phone, or they interview over Skype, and they don't know what the other person's doing. You know, and you can tell when somebody's talking about something, you can tell how excited they are, and you can tell when it's starting to come to a close, or flip side, if they're talking too much, you can start to do this on the video, okay? You don't have to broadcast the video, but if you're gonna interview somebody, see their face. It really, really works well. There's a tool, again, this is the tool of the day, this might change, but there's a tool I like called Squadcast. And that's on that page. Squadcast lets you do remote interviews, and part of what Squadcast does is they just give a little 1-inch video so you can see each other. The video is never broadcasted, but when you do an interview and you can see how the other person's doing, it really, really helps. When you can catch your interviewee in the eye, it's a really, really good place to be. The interview calculator, if you head out to that podcastpartnership.com/recommend, or recommends, or whatever it was, it's on the last slide. We have a thing called the interview calculator, and it's a way to decide whether or not your interview is worth anything. And basically, what's it gonna provide, what's it gonna do, you add up the numbers, it gives you a ranking system, and it's just a good way to tell if the interview makes sense. So, content, own the media, and own the ideas. 2 things. Been a lot happening in podcasting right now where people are basically opening up the New York Times and reading the New York Times and calling it a news podcast. It's actually somebody reading the New York Times, and you know who owns the New York Times? It's called the New York Times. So, yeah, shaking, maybe it was you in the back that was doing it, I don't know. But they got in trouble. And you have to own the content. It has to be yours, it has to be original. And by the way, if it's not original, it's somewhere else. So therefore, there's no reason for them to go to you. So own the media, own the ideas. Music. 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 Paul, I want to put 5 seconds of an AC/DC song on my podcast. It's fair use, right? I mean, I'm not really making any money off the podcast. First of all, if you're not making any money on the podcast, shame on you. Secondly, if you have just decided that you will never make money on your podcast, even worse, shame on you. One day AC/DC will come after you, okay? By the way, there are bots now that are downloading podcasts to find out if any music is being used. And the way podcasting works, see, podcast is a download, not a stream. So the amount, you hear about how Spotify pays next to nothing when they stream music, it's because it's a stream. If it's a download, you pay a bunch. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars per song, per episode. People trying to solve it, I don't know if they're ever gonna solve it. Get music that you can own, get music that you have the rights to. If you have somebody who can write music for you, there are people out there that can write music for you. Last thing you want to do, I told you about the guy who had to shut down the show because he didn't have the right clearance for his music. Like, don't do this to yourself. Fair use, there is no fair use in podcasting, just deal with it. Okay, best podcasting type. Everybody asks, Paul, what's the best kind of podcast? Right? You know, I mean, if I can tell you that, we're gonna go places. There's no correct podcast, there's no better podcast because the market that you've identified needs a very specific message. Tuesday night, I'm doing an event with Lou Mangello. I can't remember the exact time, but we're doing a podcast marketing online and off. And I said the name Lou Mangello, and somebody out there just smiled instantly because Lou is like one of the greatest people in podcasting. There he is in the back. Hey, Lou. So Lou, now I got to tell a story about Lou while he's in the room. That's kind of embarrassing. Lou was at an event that I wasn't at. And we had a mutual friend who does part of his podcast. He calls it The Last 5 and 5. And he asks people, what are the last 5 podcasts you listen to? Not what are the best 5 podcasts for your soul or what are the most important 5 podcasts, but what are the last you listened to? And I heard that Lou was going to be on the show. And Lou is one of the smartest guys I know. And so I want to know what Lou listens to, right? Who wants to know what Lou listens to? So jump to that part of the show. Lou starts with, Lou, bless you, man. Lou says, well, I mean, I never miss Paul's show. I'd grab the microphone, but there'd be all this noise. But then Lou said, this is really important. He gets in, he gets out, it's done, and I can move on. If my show was the ramblings of a podcast maniac, Lou wouldn't be listening. There's some shows where people want rambling maniacs, and there's maybe some political statements in that we won't go into. But the fact of the matter is, you gotta get your audience what they want. Had a client in the CrossFit space who had an hour and 15-minute interview with people about CrossFit. But here's the thing, you know what CrossFit people do? They spend a lot of time with earbuds in their ears because they're doing the ropes and this kind of thing. And the show was working. His audio on YouTube, with just the picture in that little squiggly line, you've seen it before, they're called audiograms, was getting more consumption than full-length videos about CrossFit in that space we're getting because he knew exactly what his audience wanted. So there's no correct, there's no better format. What you have to do, it's, you know, what's the best show format? How long is a piece of string? How tall is a building? What are you making for dinner? Like, it depends on who the audience is. But if you go back to that 4Ms thing, combine that with a little bit of testing, now I can actually find if this is working. I'm seeing a couple of heads nodding in this room, so that's kind of cool. What we do at the Podcast Partnership, 4 things. Number 1, and this one's crazy because there's not a lot of this in podcasting. Number 1, we actually think logically. We sit down and go, well, if we know the market and we know the message, the first thing we do is there any money in that? You know, I'm going to have CEOs leave money in my tip jar. No, you aren't. CEOs don't do tip jars. There's some audiences who do. But we think logically, does this make sense? Do we work through this? Then the next thing we do, it's really fun. Met a company. Client. 1 million emails a week opened. 1 million emails a week opened. Paul, how do we know what our audience wants? Rhymes with ask them. We forget that, you know? And by the way, well, what if I have no audience? Well, then the 2 people who might be listening, ask them, okay? We ask the audience. You can do that with survey. You always want to reward good behavior. If you just say generally on Twitter, hey, what do you guys want? And you don't get any responses because you didn't reward them. Hey, what do you want? We're going to pick our favorite one and give you a $25 Amazon gift card. Bam, done, okay? We look at the industry. Are there other people doing podcasts of this topic? How long are they? How are they working? Don't assume that just because there's a podcast out there that sounds like $1 million, that it's making $1 million, okay? But look at it, examine it, and then finally, and this is really, really important, track results. Had a client who believed very, very strongly, and this was 6 or 7 years ago, so things change, but I had a client who believed really, really strongly that she was supposed to do interviews. because that's what you do in her industry. In her industry, lots of interviews. And the interviews were a pain in the tuchus. And there were legal forms back and forth. There was lining things up. There was a lot of times the talent wanted to listen to the interview. And then we were looking at the stats, and people were only listening to about half of the interview. A lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of overhead. But then this person was also doing a weekly 15-minute update about her topic. She was killing it on. And she knew the knowledge, she knew the information. We were getting not 100%, mind you, we were getting 111% consumption. How does that work, Paul? I know a little bit about math. What does that mean? They were actually listening and they were rewinding and listening again. Okay? Track the results. She now went from this interview to a short content thing. There's a smile on her face, there's a bounce in her step, and the show is going to be more profitable when we move over to it. So if you think logically, you ask your audience, you look at the industry, and then you track results. That's how you figure out what kind of show you want to put together. Okay, the tech. Everybody wants to talk about tech. Podcasting power move, lossy versus lossless. Record, lossless. More hard drive space, but hard drive space is so cheap these days. Record in something that isn't compressed. Paul, my favorite app, doesn't do that. It's time for a new app. It's not complicated. Record lossless, edit lossless, do everything in lossless. Very last minute, make the MP3. 8 recording issues. Number 1, recording. Recording is an 80-20 situation. Paul, I don't want to record unless I can get it perfect. You're never going to get it perfect. Go for 80-20. Get 80% of it done, and you'll be at a good place. Recording issue number 2, the room. The room's a big part of it. The room is a big part of it. Oh man, you guys saw number 3. The room's a big part of it. In this room, there's bouncing. You know, I say, hey, it's bouncing all around the room. When you listen to the recording of this, and more of you listening to the recording of this at home that are in this room, you're hearing the bounce. But it's just the issue of the room. But if you're in a room where, you know, there's no furniture or that kind of thing, you get that bounce. You can fix that up. There are solutions in the $25 range, Amazon foam from China that will kill you. Or you can upgrade, sorry. I have a third arm, I'm not gonna show you. Fix up the room. There's a company in the thing, we don't have an affiliate relationship with them at all. They will help you in that space. Get the room done right. The microphone. Best thing I ever heard about the microphone. What microphone does the stand-up comic use? The one that's on stage. Okay? Don't sweat over the microphone. Currently at the time of recording, my favorite microphone is the Samson CO1U. It's on that page. It's less than $100. For $100, you can get that. You can get a spit guard. Get a spit guard, trust me. And you can get a boom. And, you know, you're good to go there. Don't worry about the microphone. The room's actually more important. Number 4, interview options. For those of you who do want to interview, a couple things. Number 1, you can put them in the same room. Number 2, you can get a bridge line. I've got a client in the tens of millions of downloads who records a show every week by 2 people call into a phone number and they talk. And it sounds like a recording of a phone call because you know what it is? It's the recording of a phone call. But it's set up properly. It's amazing content. And that's done. There are some HD options in that world. Man, I'm flicking the phone here. We'll go back. I think I can do that. Yeah. No, 2. Look at that. Okay. Bridge lines. That's called a bridge line. Uber Conference is one of them. There are some other tools like that that you can get. Uber Conference will let you connect with a computer if you want to. That's there. You got some HD options. Number 3, you can record the phone. There is a current product called the Rode Procast something. It's a $600 mixer where track 6 can be your phone by Bluetooth. Instead of having to get all complicated, you just call somebody and you do the interview. Well, Paul, won't that sound like a person on a really good microphone talking to somebody on the phone? Yes, that's exactly what it'll sound like, and that's worked for radio for the last 100 years. Okay? And just set it up. Don't pretend that you're in this. I'm in the studio with my good friend Bob, and then Bob is recording on the phone and you can hear the horn honking in the background. But you can record the phone if you want to. Malcolm Gladwell is my podcasting hero. On a recent episode of Revisionist History, I don't know if anybody heard this one, he had this moment with George Will. George, smart boy. And he says, by the way, if it sounds like George Will was recorded from my phone while he was on speakerphone in the middle of traffic, it's because George Will was recorded from my phone while he was on speakerphone in the middle of traffic. George is a busy guy. Get over it. We're lucky to have him on the show. You can record the phone. Number 4, you can record Skype. One of the companies here today at this event, sorry on the video, but it's in the links. There's a company called Ecamm. Ecamm, if you're on the Mac, has a fabulous software for recording Skype. It's absolutely fantastic. If you don't have a Mac, buy the really expensive version of Ecamm that comes with a cheap Mac. Interview warning, there's a thing called audio bleed. Audio bleed's a real thing. What happens is if I'm recording on my computer, and my computer's a couple of seconds faster than your computer is, what happens is at the end of the conversation, we're not having the same conversation. We're talking over each other. And it's a really, really good mess. It's a really real mess. And so what you want to do is just don't deal with the service that has an audio bleed problem. We can get over that now. But it's important because if you're in the room, and 2 of you are talking in the room, and you're talking on the microphone, to each other, and you're bouncing off the wall, you can even get some audio bleeds over to the other tracks and that kind of stuff. You got to look into audio bleed. That's where you hire a decent engineer to help you figure those things out. You can record on phones and tablets now. You can get a HD microphone for all the Apple products. There's some HD options on USB-C for the Android products as well. And you can record on a tablet. If you record on a device, edit on a device, back to our rule, I want you to be able to export all the tracks lossless because someday you might want to do some more editing. There are some great, amazing products out there that will let you edit on the phone, that will let you edit on the iPad, but the problem is if they go out of business, you don't want them to take your podcast with you. So one of the things you want to do is editing is work with a standard out there. Noise removal, enhancing. You can remove noise. Computers can do that. It's amazing, but it's not like 24, okay? You can't just click the button. My favorite is the client who says, I want the NPR sound, like it's a file save as NPR sound, But with 24, no, it's not 24. With noise removal, there are things you can do to help remove the noise. There's stuff you can do to enhance. There are tools and there are services out there. You might have to pay them a few bucks a month, but you know what? They're worth it. Currently, we love the tool Aphonic. I'm going to say that one. I think they're going to be around for a long time. Aphonic does some cloud-based enhancing, does some cloud-based leveling, takes out background noise, that kind of stuff, but do some sort of noise removal enhancing. It shouldn't be you, by the way. If you're the one trying to make everybody sound the same volume, you don't really understand the value of life. There are computer programs that do that now. Power move the blanket. The blanket. Linus was right. Some of you in the room get that, some of you don't. If you want that perfect sound, throw a blanket over your head. All the bouncing goes away. The room is set up. Yeah, it works. It works really, really well. And where did it come from? Which amazing podcaster invented the blanket method? World War II, the BBC. Army blankets, when they were doing their reporting during the raids and whatnot, they were literally reporting with wool blankets over their heads to get that BBC sound. Personally, I would be out of town if the bombing was coming, but that's a whole other thing. But power move recording the blanket. Set up the noise. Here's the funny thing. If we're listening to a podcast live from the headquarters of the 79th blah, 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 studio blah, 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 and then the interview is, there's a disconnect. We have so many disconnects in podcasting. But when Malcolm Gladwell says, the reason it sounds like I recorded him on my phone was because I did, because he's busy, you're like, dang it, I got some George Will time. Set up the background noise. If the two of you are recording on a bridge line, say, hey, to get us together, to get you this information to the market that you know, to the message that you defined, to the money-making model that you've got in front of you, it's okay if it's a phone call. Just set it up. Don't try to pretend. One of my favorite shows is a show called Roderick on the Line. Roderick is a musician from the Pacific Northwest who's literally like a rock and roll philosopher king. And the first 50 episodes of the show was the guy who literally said, yeah, Roderick's not going to do the tech thing, so I'm going to call him and we're just going to get Roderick on the line. It's a great show if you set it up, if you just explain what it is. So your podcasting power move is set up the noise. Editing, it's a lot of the magic, even more of the debate. The quick edit versus the complete edit. Do you have to have the NPR sound? No. If you think you do, just simply ask yourself, why? If you have an answer, ask yourself if you can afford it. If you can, progress. Godspeed. But sometimes you don't need that. The right niche, the right conversation, the microphone. I saw John, the marketing AI guy. Somebody help me here? Oh, well, there's a genius marketing AI guy here. And they have a show called Marketing Over Coffee. Chris Penn. And Chris gets together with John once a week and they put a microphone on the table at a Winchell's Donuts. And they talk about marketing every week with the Winchell's Donuts noise in the background. And it's a fantastic show. So fantastic, I can't even remember the guy's name. But the edit literally is here, shoot it out. Sometimes it's here, edit out the coughs. You guys want a trick that we use? This is a cool trick. We call it the 3-clap edit, okay? You're recording the show, and you made a mistake. Guess what you do with the 3-clap edit? Okay? Then the editor who's looking at the audio sees, they go up, edit. You do the 3 claps. You go, hey, editor, I just said this thing, and yeah, and if that goes public, I'll probably get fired, so why don't you just edit out the last 4 minutes of this, start where I said this, I'll give you a little pause, and you go from there. The editor can do that change really, really quickly. You gotta decide, is it a complete edit or is it a quick edit? What can you afford? What are you gonna do? Who's the talent? You have to decide these things. Podcast power move, record more than you need and edit down. Oop. Finalizing, making the MP3. It's the last step. It might change. You might make CDs might come back. Records came back. Why can't the MP3? Why can't the CD, right? There might be a point where you have to make better audio. So have the project that you make the MP3 from. Bit rates. It's just you talking. The recording quality that you need to get the Berlin Philharmonic is a slightly higher audio quality than you need for you to be talking. There are some people left on this planet who still pay for data. They don't have unlimited data. The last thing you want to do is just have a big honking file. But bit rates, we like, as of today, 96K. And we like 96K mono. Paul, come on. Mono went out in the 50s. Yes, but half the world is listening to podcasts with one earbud in. If you have a stereo thing, and by the way, nobody talks in stereo. We all talk in mono. And if you've ever done a podcast where one guy's in this ear and one guy's on this ear, it's headache inducing. Okay, 96K mono, make your life easy. Loudness. Yeah, you've been there, haven't you? Yeah, you've been listening to that show, I know, yeah. Be the same volume as Siri. Because if Siri talks during your podcast, if Siri's 3 times as loud and she starts screaming at you, that's not what you want. And by the way, if you're, twice as loud as Siri, then Siri comes on, then you have to turn up the show, and then they come back. Be the same loudness as Siri. Mono versus stereo, we check. Look at that, I turned her on, that's hilarious. Okay, we're back. Stop it. That's a new one. There we go, okay. Show artwork. There are 2 things. There is show artwork and there is episode artwork. Okay, show artwork is the artwork for, get this, your show. I know, it's crazy. Then when you go out and market your show, that's the thing that represents who you are. Everybody picks up show artwork. Every podcast platform does show artwork. Now, Apple lately has been ignoring your show artwork if it's less than 500K, if it's more than 500K in size. So therefore, make yours less than 500K in size because they're Apple and they win, okay? Show artwork. There are some people who are looking at podcast artwork on a screen this big. There's some people looking at podcast artwork on a phone, 5 or 6 years old, a couple inches. The artwork should be bold. The artwork should tell the story. The artwork should have as few words as possible. And by the way, the bottom 15% of the screen should not have anything because that's where Apple puts the play button. Everybody does episode artwork, think through it. However, some do, that was show artwork. There is episode artwork. You can do different graphics for every episode. Some platforms pick that up, some don't. It's weird. Apple picks it up in search, but not on the device. I'm not quite sure how that works or even why that works, but if you want to do episode artwork, you can. Automating elements. Anything you can automate, automate. Paul, where's the art in that? There's no art in that. It's automation, okay? Spend your time storytelling. Spend your time producing content. Spend your time strategically figuring out what it is that you're going to do. The future AI and editing, it's coming. I met with a team, Descript. Wow. Descript.com, you'll be hearing a lot about them in the future. They transcribe your show. A lot of people do that. But you want to edit your show, you just edit the transcript. Yeah. Yeah. Descript.com. They're on that page of links. But literally, you record the show, and if Paul says something really, really stupid, you can just take out that where Paul says something really, really stupid, edit that out of the text, and it edits out the audio. It's crazy. The stuff that is coming, it's crazy. Get ready for it, which means there's not that much money in editing. Okay? By the way, let the computers do the things that the computers do. We do the things that the humans do. When we do the things that the computers do, that's bad sci-fi. Okay, technique. Number one, project to final. We chatted about that. Build your project, keep your project, archive the whole thing. Build for ad insertion. Ad insertion's coming. A lot of us are doing it already. But basically, there's a point now. January 23rd, 1993. Raise your hand if you knew what happened that day. It's an important day. It was the Marble Rye episode of Seinfeld. Some of you will have to ask your parents. The commercial that happened during the Marble Rye episode of Seinfeld, nobody remembers, but this room remembers the Marble Rye episode. The Marble Rye episode will run sometime in the next 2 weeks on TBS. It will have a different commercial. By the way, Seinfeld sold 4 years of renting his show to Hulu for $500 million. By the way, if you can rent anything that you've got for $500 million, go ahead and do that. And I just went 10%, that's all I want. Build for ad insertion. Know that at some point you might dynamically add ads. It might be done by AI, it might be different things, but have that slot in the show where you can do that. Sound as good as you can, but don't forget the story. The story is more important, the message is more important. Choose the best tool for the job, but make sure the job gets done. Power flow, we chat about this, everything until the final is done and lossless. It's really important. I've just seen so many shows that are just, $1 million microphone, $1 million studio, $1 million guest, and 4 cents on the disk space. And you don't need to do that. All right, review. Again, this was the big one. We create in lossless, we edit in lossless, we do lossless projects, and we finalize. Video podcasting. Video podcasting is the thing. When I started back in the day, Lou was there. Mark was there. There was a thing called video podcasting. And there were shows like Ask a Ninja and Rocket Boom, and there were some other shows. And there was this sort of ghetto in the iTunes marketplace of video podcasts. And they were popular, but they're expensive and issues. And then this company called YouTube came around. And then YouTube made it free and all this kind of stuff. And so video podcasting hasn't been as popular as it was back in the day. But the fact of the matter is, Apple has gotten rid of the video podcast moniker now. They're all podcasts. And you're slowly seeing video podcasts pop up. Something you want to think about. I'll be honest with you. YouTube's a wasteland. You don't want your stuff there. It's a mess. And it's going down in flames. You can quote me on that. You can take that same video, you can put it up as a video podcast, and you'll be at an interesting place. Dare anyone to debate me on the YouTube thing. It's the future, it's better than YouTube. So, final. Team members. In the production of media, which of these team members are involved? Each of these 4 sections, we're going to talk about the team clarity matrix and who's involved in the process. The strategy and review has got to be part of your content production. Why are we creating this? How are we going to test whether or not it works? If your strategy and review, if your strategy is let the talent be the talent, yeah, that was you, wasn't it? Yeah, you've heard that before. The talent obviously has to be part of the content. The edit has to be part of it, and then the operation has to manage it. Outsourcing this part, don't skimp on setup, don't skimp on services. Part 1's done. That was the big one. The rest of these are going to go a lot faster. Thanks for joining me on this, by the way. Okay, we put it online. The theme for putting it online is you have to trust your media host with your message. Raise your hand if your message is important. Okay? The rest of you are just armless, apparently. You're having a good time, Mark? You want to share it with all of us?
I'm just laughing at you.
All right, man, I appreciate it. Your content is worth it. There are people who are not treating your content like it deserves to be treated. You need to be able to trust your media host with your message. Now, half of you in this room are going, yeah. Half of you are going, wait a minute, what could go wrong? Lots can go wrong. Quick overview. You need a host that is 2 things, is ready and has real stats. Ready, what does that mean? Many of us in the room, we're getting, 1 or 2 downloads a day, whether we need it or not. Anybody can manage that. But if you've got a topic that's hot and the right thing happens, you might have thousands of requests in a couple of minutes. And if you have thousands of requests in a couple of minutes, that's called what we call in the business, you might want to write this down, good day. And if you are on a server that's not ready for a good day and it dashes, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. You got to be on a media host that you can trust. Then you got to have a media host that has real stats. Because a lot of people, one of the little secrets of podcasting, a lot of us didn't know how to do stats, so we kind of made it up. And so you got to have real stats. Well, Paul, what's a real stat? What does that mean? We'll chat about that in a second. Podcast power tip, if you do this smart, if you choose the right host, step 3 will fall right into play in this 4-step process. So there we go. The media server, stress, we chatted about. Stats, we chatted about. The IAB, the Internet Advertising Bureau. Finally, an organization has come through and said, here's how we're going to track. A lot of people were tracking in a lot of different ways. The Internet Advertising Bureau came in, specification 2.0, and this is how you track. This is the best estimation we have. Podcasting in its nature is very odd, it's very strange. And simple things like, if Richard here gets up in the morning and Richard listens to 15 minutes of a show on his Alexa, then he gets in the car and he listens to another 15 minutes of it on his phone, and then he goes to work and he listens to the rest of the show, that's 3 different connections. Is he 3 different audience members? What is he? How do we do that? IAB has made sense of all this. Long story short, if your host is IAB compliant, you can breathe with a sigh of relief. If your host has said it's not worth it, that means your host cannot afford it, and your content is worth it. Dynamic ad options, this is coming. We're going to be at a point where we're going to be able to click a button. One of the things we do for our clients is they get a monthly report. It's called get this, ready for this, write this one down, monthly report. And one of the things they get in the monthly report is they get a number of how many episodes, it's called the new content ratio, and if you're ready for this, it's a ratio of new content. We're crazy at the partnership, okay? One of the things that happens is, in the month of October, how many of the downloads were content that were released in October? We have clients who are 15, 16% any given month. More than 4 out of every 5 downloads is the back catalog. That whole Seinfeld thing I was hinting to. You want to work with a host that has dynamic ad options, at least right now, so that you know that's coming. How the media gets to your host. So I have media, part 1. How do I get it to my host? There's 3 ways. There's a web interface. A lot of the hosts will have a web interface. You just click, file, upload. Number 2, FTP, kids ask your parents. Number 3, cloud services. The This is our favorite. The editor puts it in Dropbox. And then you know how there's that Dropbox upload, download thing that takes forever and it's always spinning, it's taking all your time. If it's in the cloud, you just pull it from the cloud. So the cloud services are great. And there are a number of apps now that will take your content and put it at your service for you. Do you trust your host? The stats. 2 hosts. Those who have IAB stats, those who don't. Can you move? This is a big one. What if you have to move? There was a time when cell phones sucked. And they stunk because the cell phone company had your phone number. They didn't have to get better. They had your phone number. Your phone number was on business cards. They could kick you repeatedly in the head and you still wouldn't miss that monthly payment. Right? Some of us were kicked in the head by our phone companies, yep. And then all of a sudden this law happened where we could take our phone with us. The cell phone industry changed in a second that day because now we were in charge. Podcasting was actually born from that realization. And part of podcasting is any good host will let you move. Any bad host won't let you move. So if a host isn't doing you right, if you can pick up and move, great. If you can't, don't stick with them. The steps review. Host you can trust, put your media on that host. Show notes, transcripts, real numbers, who is heard. Yeah, I could just get a computer for free to take a transcript of my show. I put it on my website, and then all of a sudden, a zillion people who are looking for that stuff come in and download the stuff. Who's ever searched the internet for a transcript in this room? Okay? Couple? There's more people searching for podcasts. Trust you on that. The real numbers are, there are some games you can play where you use those keywords to find more search, but here's the thing. Apple's already doing it. About 25% of the podcasts right now. Lou, are they indexing your show yet? Do you know? Lou? Yeah, they're indexing his show. Every word that Lou said is being transcribed by SIRI. I won't say her name because she'll start talking to us. And now you can search for the different things that Lou talks about, and then you can get that automatically. And by the way, the SIRI implementation on the server is much better than what we can get. And so just don't worry about the transcripts right now. Yeah, it's there. It's pretty cool. Final thoughts. Team members, back to the team clarity matrix. So in the putting the content online, who's responsible for that? That's the published part. This is what the published person does. The published person is the one who takes it and puts it online. And then, of course, operations needs to make sure that that's done on time. Because if it's not done on time, and you promised the episode came out, and somebody in marketing issued a press release and that kind of stuff, you got to have operation in charge of all that. Outsourcing. A trustworthy host is less than a cup of coffee a month. But Paul, so-and-so's free. Yes, they are. They're free for a reason. By the way, if your service is free, you are the product. You don't want to be the product. There are IAB hosts that will let you move, that are ready for dynamic insertion, that are less than a cup of coffee a month. Done with number 3. Making it podcast ready. Okay, the theme for making it podcast ready is you want to design your podcast strategically for every platform. I actually heard somebody once say, well, if they don't want to listen to my show via podcast, I don't want them to listen. What? Went over to my mom's apartment one day, and if you ask mom if she's ever listened to a podcast, she will tell you as only a mom can. No, I don't have an Apple. And you ask her, would your son buy you an Apple? Is he that cheap? You know, mom would say something along the lines of, that's too complicated. But one day, I saw the iHeartRadio app on mom's Android tablet. Didn't know mom knew how to install apps, a little scared. You don't want mom installing apps. Mom, what's this iHeartRadio app doing here? Radio told me to. Also another problem. You know, mom, I'm on that. Proud moment. Bragging to mom, right? Mom goes, no, son, that's only for radio. But mom, I'm on the iHeartRadio app. And she looks at me as only a mom. are you on radio now? You know, like I've finally made it, okay? The iHeartRadio app is annoying. I've had people tell me, I don't want to be on iHeart. You know what? Some of your audience is. Maybe it's not mom, but it's somebody important. You want to be everywhere. There's all the podcast platforms. There's all the podcast places. You got to design it so that it goes everywhere and design approach that supports that. Makes sense. So you want to be any place that might take your podcast. So the quicker overview of that process is your show needs a feed. Now, a feed is a computer talking to another computer about the details of your show. Think of it the way, actually, when you open up your word processor and you send something to your printer, the word processor talks a language of the printer called PostScript. Your printer does not talk Microsoft Word, it talks PostScript. Word is what does that. Word is what makes it easy for us. Word then sends it to the printer. The feed is the way these things communicate with each other. And the fact of the matter is, any good podcasting host will write the feed for you. Any good podcasting host will write the feed for you. Paul, I heard I should write my own feed. You also have friends who say you should make your own, dishwashing detergent. You don't need to. You don't need to. You tell the directories, here's the great thing. You tell Apple, here's my feed. Apple goes, thank you. We're done. You tell Stitcher, here's my feed. You tell iHeartRadio, here's my feed. iHeartRadio, you wait 3 months. There's a whole stupid little process, but you have to do that. You tell the people that your feed's there, that's all they need. Now they know. That feed's the important part. Now, the great thing about a feed is, and I got a slide come up here, but basically, when you put a new episode, your feed updates, and everybody looks at your feed automatically for you, so you don't even have to tell iHeart that there's a new episode. You don't have to tell Pandora that there's a new episode. You just update your feed once. So you tell the directories once that your show exists. The directories find new. The directories, there we go. Okay, the directories find out new episodes because they check every once in a while. Now, this is frustrating because you release your episode midnight on Wednesday, and Apple doesn't decide to check if there's a new episode until midnight on Thursday, so there's a day you've been public, and Apple doesn't necessarily tell anybody, and that's kind of the situation, but that's just the way it works. But they find out new if you put it up there. What we like to do is we like to do it 10, whatever day we say, if the podcast is releasing Wednesday morning, we put it up at about 10 o'clock on Tuesday nights. And there's some people who get the podcast early, and people get the podcast early. I got the podcast early. Those are the rabid audience fans that you want. So definitely be okay with that. Your feed has an email address. This is really, really important because this is where all your spam goes to. Anybody ever heard the Tom Webster podcast, Tom Reads His Spam? It's a delightful podcast. Tom just reads his spam with all the enthusiasm of an Elizabethan actor. It's a ton of fun. You get all your spam there, but unfortunately, you also get, oh, hey, by the way, we here at Apple don't like what you're doing. We've shut down your show and you better fix it. Happened to a client of mine a couple days ago. You want to be listening to that email address. So there's a lot of spam, and you got to deal with it. But that is there. We'll talk about the importance of the email address in a second. The email address needs to be owned by you. The two sides of the story are the good stuff and the bad stuff is going to come through it. But also, really important, is that if you ever want to leave, they're going to send the leave directions to the email address. And if you don't have the email address, we have a really, really big problem. You have to own the email address. One thing you can do with the feed, there are services now, Libsyn, for $2 more a month, will put your feed on your domain. Libsyn goes down, Apple's still pointing at your feed, call somebody, get it fixed. But $2 more to have the feed at your domain is a nice kind of thing. Your feed, your domain is absolutely crazy delicious. Where does the feed come from? There are two schools of thought. There are people who's heard the most effective use of podcasting is to get a modern installation of the WordPress software system and then use a series of plugins so the Russians can, no, wait a minute. there's a process of building your own feed. There are tools that will build the feed for you. Always let a computer build the feed for you. Stats. You want stats, you want IAB stats. Here's what you get, here's what you don't get. We got clients pay us a lot of money, like what we're doing. Usually about 6 or 7 months, we'll get the email, hey Paul, what's my subscribers? The nature of podcasting, just the way it works, we don't know the subscriber number. It's just the way it is. It's not like we're hiding it. We just don't know it. Now, Apple has how many people have subscribed to Apple, and Spotify has how many people have subscribed there, so we're beginning to build part of it, but we don't get those straight numbers. And again, I might have the Apple TV at home, might be on my wife's account, the iPhone might be on mine, the HomePod might be on my kids, so is that 3 different subscriptions? How does it work, that kind of thing. You don't get the subscribers, you get the downloads. And you can begin to pontificate, and here's the thing. Who cares how many subscribers you have? What matters is how many downloads you got. Anybody got a YouTube channel with a significant amount of, 10,000 or more subscribers on their YouTube channel? How many downloads are you getting from those 10,000 subscribers? 5, 6? It's a mess right now. So you don't get the you don't get the subscribers, but you do get the downloads. And here's the thing. 5,000 downloads is 5,000 downloads. 10,000 downloads is 10,000 downloads. So you could take a look at these numbers, and what's really neat is we can go in deeper, and we'll chat about that in a second. We can find out how far they listen. You're not going to get subscribers. Podcast power move. When you tell the world, it's scary to tell the world, because then it's real. What if there she goes again. Hey Siri. That is really funny.
Yes.
Stop it!
Sometimes I do feel funny. What is your mother's name?
That is just really odd. Note to self, turn off the internet next time. With Apple, you're just a number. Your show number 65421. There's a literary reference that 3 of you get. Apparently you, and apparently you. The great thing is you can tell Apple, hey, I've changed the name, or I've changed the art, or I've changed the description, or I've changed the category, or these types of things. That's part of the beautiful thing about the feed. So you're just a number, you can change around if you need to. The steps review. Let your host write the feed that works for everyone. Let the computers do the work that the computers are supposed to do. Tell all of the directories. And by the way, at the end, we've got that list for you that you can take a look at. Team Clarity members, this is a 2-step process. Publish. Somebody's got to publish this. Make sure everybody knows. Now here's the situation. Things change all the time. Right now in North America, more people listen to Pandora every day than listen to podcasts. More Americans listen to Pandora every day, North Americans listen to podcasts. SiriusXM just acquired Pandora. Now we know why. But the fact of the matter is, you can put your podcast on Pandora now. Now, if you bought a book from 6 months ago about where to put your podcast, they weren't on the list. The publish list always changed. Radio.com. Who's heard a commercial for Radio.com recently on the Get This Radio? Some of us still listen to the radio. Apparently nobody in this room. Clear Channel is spending a couple $1 million a month advertising the Radio.com app. To me personally, I think a Radio.com app would be about Get This Radio, but they're putting podcasts on that as well. And so part of the publishing process is you need to know what is open, what's going on, where can you publish to, who can you tell. On that web page at the end, we've got the top 10 directories to publish to. And then we've got a link to somebody who also keeps up to date with the rest of the stuff. This is the operation. The operation's got to make sure that it's published, got to make sure that it's done on time, got to make sure that it is done to schedule. Yeah, we're doing good. Okay. The right media host will do all this for you. Right now, we're really big fans of the company Libsyn, Libsyn. Libsyn, you know how I heard about Pandora? Libsyn sent me an email. Said, hey, Pandora's going to do podcasts now. Here's what you do to get on. okay? Again, somebody just has to check the email and somebody has to respond to this stuff. But the right media host will do this for you. The larger media hosts, if you get yourself in a situation where you're on the list of the good ones, maybe you sometimes even get in a little bit earlier, get this released. It was really fun when I got the email from Pandora, saying that everybody's there, and I was able to call the clients and say, you're on Pandora before your competition is. I just play the game. I just do it right. You do the same. But a good media host will let you know what's going on. We'll work with them, work with one of the big guys. The small guys that are just fighting to stay alive, everybody loves, a story like that, but your podcast is more important than that. Work with somebody who's going to do the feed correctly. By the way, Google changed the rules 15 times on what you're supposed to put in your feed. Who's been keeping track of that? Should be your host or your consultant. The right media host will do this for you. Make sure you're working with them when you outsource this stuff. Stay on top of the changes. The changes are just key. Right now, it's just the crazy game we're in. There are 2 different divisions at Google for podcasting, and they don't talk to each other. How very Microsoft of them. But the fact of the matter is, there's Google Play Music, and there's Google Podcasting, which are 2 different groups. Now, the problem is, one can say, well, I prefer the Google Play infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. But if your audience uses the other one, you got to be on both. At some point, Google will kill Google Play. Your audience who's on Google Play, where are they going to go? What are you going to do? You need to stay on top of this stuff. There will come a point when somebody wants a special tag. There will come a point when somebody wants a certain piece of information. They might email it to you. You might hear about it at an event or something, but you need to stay on top of the changes. And that's one of the things that scales really well when you've got an agency like ours, because we need to keep track of the changes once and then just tell all of our clients, as these things pop up. But if you're in this space, you got to keep up on what's going on, because had a guy who spent over $1 million on his podcast. How do you even spend over $1 million on your podcast? I don't know. But the people who put together the podcast for him bought a book that was more than 7 months old, and they didn't even know about Pandora. More North Americans every day, on Pandora versus podcasting. So you stay on top of it. Step 4, tell the world. Our theme for that is your podcast is your content on your terms, but it's consumed by your audience on their terms. This is really, really important. However your customer wants to get your podcast, they are correct. If your customer doesn't even know what a podcast is, but they like your content, do you need to educate them? No. In telling the world, the message is not, I have a podcast that's up to the latest IAB standards for tracking with an RSS 2.0 schema. People love schemas. You tell them I got a show, and here's how you listen. For the client in CrossFit, about 1,500 people a week were listening on YouTube. Were they wrong? No. Let them consume however they want to consume. Your podcast, your terms, consumed by your audience on their terms. What do we do with that? How do we go through with that? Let's chat about it. Quick overview. RSS makes this true set it and forget it. So the great thing is if somebody makes a change and if you submit yourself to all the directories, there's a podcast app called Overcast. Raise your hand if you use Overcast. Overcast is the power user of podcast apps. If you're a hardcore power user, podcast geek, you use the Overcast app. Great thing is, if your RSS feed's good, Overcast is up to date. Pandora, if your RSS feed is good, your podcast is up to date. Stitcher, all 3 listeners. If your podcast feed is good, your podcast is up to date. It's true set it and forget it if you set it up correctly. There's a lot of automation options for non-podcast platforms. YouTube is not a podcasting platform, but it's a place where you want to put your content. So having a good feed is not going to automatically update YouTube, but there are tools, there are services. A number of the podcast hosts will click a button, publish this to YouTube as well. Click a button, publish this to Facebook as well. Click a button, publish this to LinkedIn as well. You have to decide if that is a good strategy and if that is what you want to do. But in terms of letting your audience get things on their terms, new episodes trigger the directory updates eventually, so you don't have to worry about that part. If you do it right the first time, everything lines up, everything is great. The Apple Podcast Power Move we shared. No, actually, this is a new one. If you tell Apple first, see, people want to launch, they want to launch big. I want to be everywhere. That's good, be everywhere. You definitely want to be everywhere, but here's the thing. Tell Apple first. One of two things is going to happen. Apple's going to go thumbs up, or Apple's going to go thumbs down. Those are the two options you get from Apple. Now, here's the thing. If Apple goes thumbs down, fix it. You can email them. Like all good tech support, anybody had that situation where you contact tech support and the person you're talking to has no idea, so you just hang up and call them again to find somebody who knows what they're talking about? That's the way it works at Apple. So if somebody cannot tell you why it didn't work, just email somebody else. Start a new ticket, that kind of thing. But if you tell Apple first, what happens is Pandora makes sure that what they're doing works at Apple. Stitcher makes sure what they're doing is working at Apple. It's the great default. So if you tell Apple first, you get things right. And then what's really interesting is once you confirm it's right at Apple, then some really crazy things happen. Overcast, this tool that I told you about. Overcast actually, sneakily, but they admit to this, they actually get their data from Apple. Castbox gets their data from Apple. A number of the podcast hosts get their data from Apple. So you're at about 75% of all your podcast downloads come from you getting it right at Apple. Then you tell the other directories. If you go to, again, and it'll be the last slide, podcastpartnership.com/recommend, we've got all the directories that you want to go to, but make sure it is right at Apple first. Equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome is really important. Your podcast is on the same directory that Malcolm Gladwell's on. Your podcast is on the same directory as WDW Radio, right? WD Radio, oh, sorry, Lou. Lou's show, it's on the same directory as Lou's show. Mark Mason's Late Night Internet Marketing, same directory. Social Media Examiner show, same directory. It was one of the cool things that got me attracted to the web in the early days was that we had this equality of opportunity. We can be there, and somebody searches for us, they can find us. But that doesn't mean equality of outcome. It's really important. Just because your podcast is there doesn't mean that people are going to be searching for it. Just because your podcast is there doesn't mean they're going to be subscribing to it or downloading to it. Now, it is really cool to tell somebody, yeah, I'm at Apple. It's really cool. And Apple actually does a page, every podcast in the Apple Podcast Directory, which passed like 700,000 podcasts recently, every podcast has a page at apple.com. So you can tell your client, hey, just see me at apple.com, I'm there. And by the way, every episode you have also has a page at apple.com, so you could have hundreds and hundreds of pages at apple.com. And it's cool, and your kids will just think you're really important if you have that. But the equality of opportunity is not the equality of outcome. Hey, my podcast is live. How come I'm not getting all the downloads? Because opportunity and outcome are not the same thing. But flip side, had a client who was doing really good numbers, really good space. One day they did an episode about a topic that they didn't typically do an episode on. They got 4 times as many downloads as any other episode they'd ever done. Why? And how can we do it again and again and again? Well, here's the thing. The topic of their show was not being well served on iTunes. They found it, and they were serviced. See, the opportunity for search is there. A mutual friend of Mark and mine, he has a clean comedy podcast that he used to call the Ramen Noodle because it reminded of him when he was trying to do comedy, all he could afford were ramen noodles. And a whole bunch of people would go to the podcast trying to get ramen noodle recipes, and they get really, really frustrated. What's this guy joking on about? See, nobody's going to Apple Podcasts searching for ramen when they want clean comedy. One day he just changed it to the ramen noodle, semicolon, a clean comedy podcast. See, people are looking for clean comedy. Numbers went through the roof. So, quality of opportunity, it's not the quality of outcome. You don't have the ability to go on the news and promote your show and that kind of stuff. But if they're looking for what it is that you've got a really unique opportunity, which all comes to ranking. I want to be a top show, Paul. I want to be a top show. Who wants to be a top show? Raise your hand if you want to be a top show. We all want to be a top show. What we know, what we don't know. We took one client to number one in all of iTunes. Number one, all of iTunes. Did it without a single review. Now they came in. The name was big enough. The popularity was big enough. They came in pretty quickly, but number one in all of iTunes. We did another client, which took number 4 of all of iTunes. Somebody says, hey, Paul, you took this person to number 4 in all of iTunes. My audience is about 5 times bigger. What can you do for me? So I think we can take it to number 1. We've done it before. I think we can do it again. The person wanted to do it on their terms. See, it's Apple's terms. It's Apple's playground. What we know is ranking is based largely on how many people click the subscribe button. That's what it is. A huge chunk of your ranking is based on how many people have clicked the subscribe button in the last 24 hours. We don't know what that number is. I have my prediction. Others will tell you, but I have a friend, he's over here, created a show, disassociated himself with him for legal reasons, put it in the Apple podcast directory, and got 10,000 subscribes from Bangladesh without a single download. It was the number 1 podcast. No reviews, no ratings, no downloads, just the subscribe button. So, if you want to rank, it's how many people can click subscribe. Now, this is actually not bad from a marketing standpoint, because here's the funny thing. If I were to launch a podcast today, and I were to make it worth your while to subscribe, and everybody in this room were to subscribe to the podcast, I'd be number 1 in my category in about 15 minutes. Doesn't take that much. Somebody has a really big mailing list, they can be number 1 in their category or go up. So what we know is that ranking is based on, and people tell you it's based on this, it's based on that. We've taken about 27 times, we've taken people to number 1 in their category, made a number in the top 10, and said we got 1, we got the numbers. The guy who had 5 times the audience, he got 5 times the downloads of the person who made it number 4, had 5 times the clicks of the person who made it number 4, did everything right, except the problem was the clicks and the downloads were his website with his play button. If I send you to my website to click play, not only does Apple not know, but that's kind of a good thing. If Apple knows what you're doing independently of Apple, we're in a really bad place. That's Google or Facebook's job, not Apple. Few of you will get that. You got to play the game if you want to rank. Now, the thing is, how important is ranking? You got to meet your client's needs. They got to come back. They got to listen for more. If they subscribe and they don't listen, if they don't take action, if they don't do what it is that you want them to do, it's not that big of a deal. So if you want to rank, it's how many people click subscribe in a 24-hour time period. I'm guessing, best we can tell, that's about 90% of your score. What we don't know is what the rest of the score is. What do we track? We track downloads, but we track downloads by the IAB standard because those are real. Had a client, Paul, I got 25,000 downloads. They're all from Bangladesh, and they're all from a Java app at one location. It's not real. You want to track downloads. You want to track real downloads. You want to track how far they consume. If you get 150, 100,000 downloads, and everybody listens for 5 minutes and decides that this show's junk and leaves, you've just insulted 150, 100,000 people. It's not a good move. Okay? So you want to track downloads, but you want to track how far they consume. Told you about the client with the interviews. 40-50% for the interview, 111% for the shorter content. See, the downloads are important, but how far they consume is even more important. So Apple, podcastconnect.apple.com will tell you how far they consume on the Apple platform. Podcasters.spotify.com, it's on that big list of links I have at the end, will tell you how far they consume on Spotify. Those two chunks are really good sampling. It's not the exact answer to everything, but it's good to tell. And it's funny, I did a 6-part series on the podcast partnership, a 6-part series about this whole Team Clarity Matrix thing. It's the same topic. It's part 1, it's part 2, it's part 3, it's part 4, 5, 6. Number 1 got like 110% consumption. Number 2 got 96. Number 3 got like 12. Like I just did something wrong in episode 3. But here's the thing, I re-recorded it. And the numbers went back up. So we track consumption to see how far they go. Paul, I got a killer ad and it didn't sell anything. Well, if nobody listened to the ad, what's the fault? So we got to track consumption. We got to track over time. When you release all your subscribers, they're going to download. But what happens later? Are people still looking for you? Do you got anybody new? You track that whole new content ratio a bit, which again is that crazy ratio of new content. If you track the stuff over time, you have a really, really interesting story. Do all of your downloads come the first 24 hours after your episode comes out, or is there a slow trickle for the rest of your life? I got a client who gets about 150 downloads of an episode every single day that he released about 10 years ago. That piece of information is really, really important. You got to track the strategy. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? And that's back to that thing on the matrix about, strategy/review. What are we trying to do? Is it accomplishing? If they're downloading and they're consuming and you told them to do something that's trackable, and please bookmark my website and come back often. Please don't do the podcast version of that. Subscribe to my newsletter. There's an exciting one. Pull over on the side of the road, go to their website really quickly to sign up to yet another newsletter. Every day, cannot get enough of those newsletters. But, right? I know you guys get up at night, pour yourself a glass of wine, read all the newsletters. They're so good. So good. But if you said, hey, stay-at-home mom who's trying to figure out how to get some revenue coming in, here's a special report about revenue. You do an episode for that, and you know that 4,000 stay-at-home moms made it to the ad, and 3,000 of those stay-at-home moms gave you their email address. Now you know it's working. So if you do the downloads to the consumption to the strategy, now we have something. I used to say, raise your hand if you were excited if only one person listened to your podcast. Nobody would raise their hand. I used to say, and what if that was the President of the United States? It used to incur a certain different feeling than it incurs today. Now I say something like the Dalai Lama or Oprah or that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, we don't want downloads. We want impact to our audience that we're trying to reach with the message. And it's great when somebody like Lou says on some show that I love Paul's show, but when I got the numbers that proves that Lou's not the only one who loves my show, that's where you go to from here. The podcast power move. You got the show. You ever seen this one? The end of the show comes with 37 requests. Please visit the website and sign up for this and go here and do this and visit my Patreon and follow me on social and leave a review on Spotify, and the list goes on and on and on. You want your audience to do one thing. You want them to subscribe. Because here's the deal. When they subscribe, the show comes to them automatically, and the show comes spam-free. Nothing else in the world that gives us that. Twitter decides what we see. Facebook decides what we see. Instagram decides what we see. YouTube decides what we see. Podcasting gives us what we asked for. And if they listen to 52 weeks of an episode, whatever you're selling them at the end of those 52 weeks, they're going to pick up, they're going to buy. If you got them for those 52 weeks, if you tracked it. So the one thing you want them to do is subscribe. I'm telling you, reviews don't matter. Now, if you have 0 reviews, call mom, have her put up one. Maybe you guys can just exchange a review here so you have 1 or 2. But get to the business of getting subscribers to your podcast because that is where the revenue is. That's where the money is. What about shares and reviews? They don't matter. What about new and noteworthy? It doesn't matter. Quick editorial. This is more than branding or ads. If someone takes you in the car, by the way, 106 million Americans drive by themselves in a car with a 30-minute commute. The only thing you have to do is be better than drive time radio. Everybody in this room is better than drive time radio, just by the indication of your pulse. If someone goes with you on a trip to work every Tuesday morning for 52 weeks, you've got them. They're yours forever. The profit response machine, in that list, I've got a video. Download it in the next week or so because it's going to be edited down. You guys get access to the full version of it. But it's a whole tutorial on how to make your podcast direct response and how to get yourselves in a position to where you can do this kind of thing. The secret to promotion, here's the secret to promotion. Don't promote your show. Show's meaningless. Promote the episode. Today on the show, we teach you how to X. Stelzner does an incredibly fantastic job of this on his show, and that's why most of you are subscribed to it. This week, we're bringing in Expert X, and we're talking about Instagram ads. Bam. If you're an Instagram person, you jump in, you listen to that show, and then at the end when he says subscribe, you go, I kind of like that guy, I kind of like that voice, I'm going to keep going. They come for the content, they stay for the voice. Justifying expenses. Paul, there's a lot more work than just talking into the phone and making something come out the other side. Yep. That's the profit response machine. There's more at the link. Basically, that's that whole thing of doing it, finding out what's working, finding out what isn't working, refining based on that. What do I do about bad advice, Paul? There's a lot of bad advice out there. Here's the deal. Somebody gives you advice, first thing, you're the guinea pig. If you're the guinea pig, get away. You don't need to be the guinea pig. Let the guinea pigs be the guinea pigs. Number 2, do they have any previous results, success, other than selling a $7 ebook about podcasting? Number 3, if they tell you something that seems too good to be true, you know what? It is. Not complicated. And then number 4, what are they tracking? What kind of results are they seeing? If they can answer those 4 questions successfully, you're in a good place. The review, you tell Apple first, you confirm that it works because Apple is the test for everything else. You tell the top directories, and then you promote the episodes, and you tell them to subscribe. The team members on this one's the strategy review. Is this working? Are we getting the numbers? Are these things happening? Someone's got to promote the thing, and somebody's got to run the operation for it. Outsourcing, the top 10 directories, that list is on the link that I will have for the last slide. That will change on a regular basis. If you get there, you're going to get about 99% of all your downloads. You outsource episodic promotion, not show promotion. The win is the subscribe. If your outsourcer does that and they know that, you're in a good place. We're making digital media. We're putting it online. We're making it podcast ready. We're telling the world. The why you're podcasting is so much more important than how you're podcasting. What is your message? That 4 M's, if you take home anything, take home the 4 M's. Who's your audience? What are you telling them? How are you going to make some revenue for it? And is podcasting the right bet? For most of the world, podcasting is, but not necessarily for all of us. But for everybody in this room, the why is bigger than the how. Mike asked me to come and share with you how to podcast. We took a lot in the last 90 minutes. I know it's happy hour downstairs, and yet most of you have stayed in this room. I consider that a great honor. Thank you so much. I am around to take some questions if anybody wants to chat. The big link is at podcastpartnership.com/recommends. There's no opt-ins. Thank you. Have a great happy hour, and have a great social media marketing world 2020.